The bright studio lights of the CNN town hall cast long, imposing shadows, painting the set in stark contrasts of black and brilliant white. In the air, a tension so palpable it felt like a physical presence. The low hum of the air conditioning, the only sound in a space that held its breath in anticipation. Across a polished table, two women sat, embodiments of two different Americas, two different generations, two entirely different philosophies of justice. On one side, Judge Judy Sheindlin, a titan of television, her 81 years etched not in frailty, but in the unyielding set of her jaw and the sharp, assessing glint in her eyes. She was a cultural institution, a symbol of an era that valued unvarnished, often brutal, honesty. On the other, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, at 43, representing a new wave of leadership. A former civil rights attorney, her posture was one of poised readiness, her expression calm but her eyes holding a fire that spoke of courtrooms fought and battles won. What began as a civil, almost academic discussion on criminal justice reform was about to detonate, live and unscripted, into one of the most shocking and defining political confrontations of the year. The catalyst was a simple question, but the explosion it triggered would expose a deep generational fault line in the American psyche. Judge Judy, known for her non-nonsense, take no prisoners approach, had just heard something that made her blood boil. Her famous gavel was nowhere in sight, but her finger, sharp and accusatory, was pointed directly at the young Texas Democrat. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Judge Judy's voice, familiar to millions, erupted across the studio, not with its usual theatrical flair, but with a raw, visceral fury. Her face, a canvas of controlled authority, began to flush a deep, angry red. 30 years on the bench, and I have to listen to this? The words were a dismissal, a public rebuke from a legend to a newcomer. But what happened next left everyone in that room, and the millions watching at home, completely and utterly speechless. Jasmine Crockett's response was so cold, so calculated, and so devastatingly precise that it not only silenced the formidable judge, but also ignited a firestorm that would go viral worldwide within hours. This wasn't just a debate, it was a dismantling. And if you believe that truth, when wielded with courage and intellect, is the most powerful weapon of all, then you'll want to stay with us. Hit that like button and subscribe, because we are about to break down every moment of this incredible showdown, and trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. To truly understand the seismic impact of that moment, one must first understand the two forces that collided. Judge Judy Sheindlin is not merely a television personality. She is a fixture in the American cultural landscape. For over 2 decades, her courtroom show dominated daytime. Her sharp wit and famous catchphrases like, "Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining," becoming part of the national lexicon. Her annual salary, once topping $47 million, was a testament to her immense popularity. But behind the television spectacle was a formidable legal mind. She had spent a quarter of a century as a real judge in New York's chaotic family court system, presiding over more than 20,000 cases. Her reputation was forged in the crucible of real-life tragedy and human failing, building a philosophy rooted in personal responsibility and a zero-tolerance policy for excuses. She was and is a product of a generation that believed in a clear, unyielding line between right and wrong. To her, justice was not a complex, nuanced concept. It was a matter of behavior, of choices, and of facing the consequences. At 81, she stood as a bastion of this old-school law and order worldview, a worldview that was about to be challenged in a way she had never anticipated. Across from her sat a woman who represented a completely different path to the halls of power. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett did not inherit a political dynasty. She earned her place in Congress through relentless hard work and a deep, abiding commitment to a different kind of justice. Before her election in 2023, she had built a formidable reputation in the trenches of the legal system as a fierce public defender and civil rights attorney in Texas. She had stood for those the system often forgot, fighting against the very disparities that Judge Judy's philosophy tended to overlook. In the Texas legislature, she became known for her passionate, articulate defense of voting rights and her calls for systemic criminal justice reform. Her power in a debate comes not from a sharp tongue, but from a sharp mind. She knows how to meticulously build an argument, present evidence, and, most importantly, remain unflappably calm under pressure. She is part of a new ascendant generation of Black women in Congress who refuse to be silenced or intimidated by the traditional bastions of authority. The stage was thus set for more than a simple disagreement. It was a fundamental clash of ideologies. Judge Judy, the embodiment of the old guard, tough on crime, unyielding in her belief in personal accountability, and a fierce defender of traditional judicial authority. Jasmine Crockett, the voice of a new wave, focused on reform, on addressing systemic inequities, and on questioning the very foundations of a system she had seen fail so many. The topic of the CNN town hall was criminal justice, but what was truly on the line was the heart of American justice itself. Whose vision would prevail? Could the legendary Judge Judy, a symbol of absolute courtroom authority, maintain her dominance when faced with a challenger who was not a defendant, but a peer armed with facts and a lifetime of different experiences? Or would Jasmine Crockett prove that the new generation of leadership would not be cowed by the old guard's fury? With millions watching, neither woman was prepared to yield an inch. The stage was set for a battle of wills, a clash of eras. Before we step into that studio and witness the first shots fired, let me know in the comments. Who did you think would win this debate before it even started? And if you're ready for the fireworks, hit that like button. It's about to get intense. The town hall began with the polished professionalism typical of a major network event. The host, Anderson Cooper, introduced both women with due respect, outlining their impressive and starkly different careers. The initial questions were handled with a certain professional distance, both Judge Judy and Congresswoman Crockett laying out their foundational beliefs on justice reform. The air was civil, the discourse measured. The first tremor, the one that signaled the impending earthquake, came when Cooper steered the conversation to sentencing disparities in drug-related crimes. Jasmine Crockett, speaking with the quiet confidence of an attorney who has lived and breathed these cases, began to explain the devastating impact of mandatory minimum sentences. "The data is clear," she stated, her gaze steady and direct. Not at Judge Judy, but at the camera, at the American people. "We have a two-tier justice system, where a young Black man with a small amount of marijuana gets years in prison, while a wealthy white defendant gets probation for much more serious crimes." Across the table, Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. Her fingers began a slow, rhythmic drumming on the polished surface, a telltale sign of rising impatience that any fan of her show would instantly recognize as a prelude to an eruption. But Crockett, undeterred, pressed on. "We need to acknowledge that our justice system was built on racist foundations, and simply being tough on crime isn't justice. It's perpetuating inequality." That was the spark. "Excuse me," Judge Judy interjected, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Racist foundations?" The temperature in the studio seemed to plummet. "I've been in courtrooms for over 30 years, young lady, and justice is blind. It doesn't see color, it sees behavior." She was now in her element, the stern, lecturing judge. "I've sentenced people of every color, every background, every economic status. If you commit a crime, you face consequences. That's not racism, that's responsibility." Crockett remained perfectly still, her legal training a shield against the older woman's rising anger. "With respect, Judge Sheindlin," she countered, her tone even, "the statistics tell a different story. Black defendants receive sentences that are, on average, 19% longer than white defendants for the very same crimes. That's not opinion. That's documented fact." For Judge Judy, facts were what she decreed in her courtroom, not numbers from some academic study. "Statistics can be manipulated, Congresswoman. What I saw every single day for 25 years were people making choices, good choices and bad choices. Stop making excuses for criminal behavior." "I'm not making excuses," Crockett replied, her voice a bastion of calm in the rising storm. "I'm asking why a Black teenager with a joint gets 5 years, while a white college student with cocaine gets community service. That's not about choices, that's about bias." A murmur rippled through the live audience, a sound of a room dividing in real time. Some nodded in agreement with Judge Judy's unyielding stance, while others leaned forward, captivated by Crockett's quiet defiance. It was then that Judge Judy, perhaps feeling her authority slipping, made a critical, fatal error. She abandoned policy and went personal. "You know what your problem is," she said, that infamous accusatory finger now pointed directly at Crockett. "Your generation thinks everything is someone else's fault. You want to blame the system instead of holding people accountable for their actions. That's not justice. That's social work." The dismissive phrase, "your generation," hung in the air, thick with condescension. Crockett's expression remained unchanged, but there was a subtle shift in her posture. She sat up a fraction of an inch straighter, a knight drawing a shield. Feeling she had the upper hand, Judge Judy pressed her attack. "You've been in Congress for what, 5 minutes? And you think you understand justice better than someone who has actually lived it for 3 decades? Anderson Cooper, sensing the imminent collision, tried to intervene. "Let's take a step back." But Judge Judy was on a roll, her voice rising. "I've seen thousands of cases, made thousands of decisions, and kept communities safe while you were probably still in law school, learning theories from professors who never set foot in a real courtroom." A hush fell over the studio. The attack was total, a public dismissal of Crockett's experience, her intellect, and her legitimacy. Judge Judy had just called her naive and unqualified on live television. The silence was deafening. What would you do in that moment? How do you respond when a legend tries to publicly humiliate you? Jasmine Crockett's answer would become the stuff of legend. If you're on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next is a masterclass. Jasmine Crockett let the silence hang in the air, a deliberate, tactical pause that felt like an eternity. The audience leaned forward. Anderson Cooper looked like he was mentally calculating the distance to the nearest exit. Judge Judy, in her chair, waited for the emotional outburst she had so clearly provoked. Instead, Jasmine Crockett did something utterly disarming. She smiled. It wasn't a broad, telegraphed smile, nor was it a fake, placating one. It was a small, knowing, almost imperceptible smile that, in that moment, looked more dangerous than any shout could ever be. "Judge Sheindlin," she began, her voice so calm it was almost a whisper, forcing everyone in the room and at home to lean in, to strain to hear. "I have a question for you." Judge Judy, perhaps sensing a shift in the current, but unable to retreat, gestured for her to proceed. "In all your years on the bench," Crockett asked, her eyes locked on the judge's, "did you ever stop to ask why certain communities kept appearing in your courtroom more than others?" The question was a subtle parry, turning the judge's own experience back on her. Judge Judy's confidence wavered, just for a second, before she snapped back with her default certainty. "Because those communities have more crime," she said, the words sharp and definitive. And that was the opening. That was the trap. Crockett's smile never faded. She leaned forward slightly, her voice still quiet but now imbued with the authority of a prosecutor who knows the verdict is already in. "Judge Sheindlin, with all due respect, that answer right there is exactly why we need criminal justice reform." The words landed with the force of a precision strike. The confident mask on Judge Judy's face began to crack. "You see," Crockett continued, her legal training on full display as she methodically built her case, piece by devastating piece. "What you just said suggests you believe some communities are inherently more criminal than others. But what if I told you that communities with more police presence naturally have more arrests? What if I told you that the mandatory minimum laws you support were specifically designed to target crack cocaine, used more in black communities, with sentences 100 times harsher than powder cocaine, used more in white communities?" Judge Judy tried to interrupt. "Now, wait just a minute." But Crockett held up a hand, a simple, quiet gesture that commanded the floor. "I'm not finished, Your Honor." The use of the formal title was a masterstroke, a sign of respect that simultaneously reminded everyone of Crockett's own legal background, a subtle signal that she was not intimidated. "You asked about my experience. Let me tell you about my experience. I've represented clients who were sentenced to decades in prison for nonviolent drug offenses while their white counterparts receive probation? I've seen a black teenager get 15 years for armed robbery, while a white teenager who committed the exact same crime got 3 years. I've watched mothers lose their children to a system that treats addiction as a crime in poor communities, but as a health issue in wealthy ones. Judge Judy's face was now crimson, but it was no longer the flush of anger. It was the hot, creeping blush of public embarrassment. She could feel the audience shifting, the momentum of the room turning against her like a tide. But Crockett was not done. You mentioned that I've been in Congress for 5 minutes. That's true, I'm new to Congress. But before that, I spent years as a public defender and a civil rights attorney. I've been inside more courtrooms, fought more cases, and seen more injustice than most people see in a lifetime. She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle in the silent studio. The difference between us, Judge Sheindlin, is that you sat on a bench and decided fates. I stood in front of benches and fought for justice. You saw defendants as cases to be processed. I saw them as human beings whose lives were being destroyed by a system that was never designed to be fair. The studio was now dead silent. Anderson Cooper looked as if he wanted to crawl under his desk, but Crockett was just getting to the heart of her argument, the point of no return. And since you brought up statistics being manipulated, she said, her voice still even, let me share some facts that can't be manipulated. The United States has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of its prisoners. We incarcerate people at rates higher than authoritarian regimes. Black Americans are incarcerated at rates 5 times higher than whites, despite using drugs at similar rates. Judge Judy managed to find her voice, but it was weaker now, a shadow of its former power. Those are just numbers. No, Crockett interrupted, her voice firm but not loud. Those are lives. Those are families destroyed. Those are communities devastated by policies that people like you called tough but fair, while never examining whether they were actually just. And then came the moment that would be replayed millions of times, the moment that would define the entire exchange. Jasmine Crockett leaned back in her chair, her professional demeanor giving way to something deeply personal. You want to talk about accountability, Judge Sheindlin? Let's talk about accountability. The audience gasped. This was not where anyone expected this to go. And honestly, this is the kind of fearless truth-telling we are committed to bringing you on this channel. If you agree, do me a favor and hit that like button right now, because the final blow was yet to come. You built a career on entertainment disguised as justice. You turned real people's problems into television drama. You made millions of dollars yelling at people who couldn't fight back because they needed the appearance fee. Judge Judy's face went from red to a stark, ashen pale. For the first time in her public life, she was utterly, completely speechless. But Jasmine Crockett saved her coldest, most surgical moment for last. She stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with the stunned judge. Your Honor, she said, the title now dripping with a subtle, cutting sarcasm. You asked what my problem is. My problem isn't with accountability, it's with hypocrisy. My problem isn't with justice, it's with people who profit from injustice and then have the audacity to lecture others about responsibility. She paused, her voice dropping back to that same unnerving whisper. You've made a career out of being tough. But being tough on people who can't fight back isn't strength. It's bullying. And I don't get intimidated by bullies no matter how famous they are. The confrontation was over. The studio was plunged into a profound silence, the kind that follows a thunderclap. Judge Judy sat frozen, her mouth slightly agape, no words coming out. The woman who had built an empire on always having the last word had been completely and systematically disarmed. Anderson Cooper, finally seeing his opening, stammered, We're going to take a commercial break. But the damage was done. As they cut to the commercial, the cameras caught one last lingering shot. Judge Judy sitting alone, looking smaller and more vulnerable than anyone had ever seen her, while Jasmine Crockett calmly gathered her papers, a quiet, satisfied expression on her face, the look of an attorney who had just won the most important case of her life. The moment the show cut to commercial, the digital world erupted. It was as if a dam had broken. Before the town hall even finished airing, The hashtag Jasmine Destroys Judy was trending not just in the United States, but worldwide. Clips of Crockett's calm, methodical demolition of the television judge were being shared, remixed, and analyzed at a speed that seemed to defy the very infrastructure of the internet. The most viral clip, by far, was that final, devastating soundbite. "I don't get intimidated by bullies, no matter how famous they are." That single 10-second clip garnered over 50 million views in the first 24 hours, becoming an instant anthem for anyone who had ever felt dismissed or belittled by a person in power. The internet did what it does best. It turned the confrontation into a cultural phenomenon. Memes flooded every platform. There were side-by-side images of Judge Judy's confident, finger-pointing posture at the beginning of the debate next to her stunned, silent face at the end, with the simple caption, "How it started versus how it's going." GIFs of Jasmine Crockett's calm, knowing smile were paired with captions like, "The face you make when you know you have the facts and they only have volume." On TikTok, a user created a Jasmine Crockett Savage Moments compilation, setting her most pointed lines to dramatic classical music. A video that itself amassed over 25 million views. The internet was on fire. What was your favorite moment from this takedown? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to read which line hit the hardest for you. The political world reacted with a swiftness that underscored the significance of the moment. Progressive leaders rushed to praise Crockett's performance. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is what it looks like when expertise meets courage." A Jasmine Crockett TX didn't just defend herself, she defended everyone who's ever been dismissed for telling uncomfortable truths about justice. Senator Bernie Sanders posted, "We need more leaders like Jasmine Crockett who can articulate why our criminal justice system needs fundamental reform, not just tougher sentences." Even moderate Democrats, not typically known for embracing such confrontational moments, lauded her skill. Senator Joe Manchin released a statement saying, "While I don't agree with all of Congresswoman Crockett's positions, her ability to present her arguments clearly and respectfully, even under attack, shows real leadership." Conservative commentators scrambled to defend Judge Judy, but their arguments felt hollow against the viral tsunami. Tucker Carlson lamented on Fox News, "Judge Judy represents decades of real, hard-won experience in courtrooms, and we're supposed to be impressed by a junior congresswoman's talking points?" But even some on the right had to acknowledge Crockett's tactical brilliance. Ben Shapiro tweeted, "Disagree with her politics completely, but Jasmine Crockett demonstrated impressive debate skills. Facts don't care about your feelings, but presentation matters." The mainstream media, including CNN itself, began to analyze the exchange not as a fight, but as a masterclass. A CNN analysis piece called it a masterclass in remaining calm under pressure, noting how Crockett expertly turned a personal attack into a profound policy discussion. The Washington Post ran a headline that read, "How Jasmine Crockett Won a Debate by Never Getting Angry," while the New York Times published a longer think piece titled, "The New Generation of Political Combat When Legal Training Meets Media Savvy." Judge Judy's team went into full damage control. A statement was released from her publicist, a bland, corporate-sounding message about how Judge Sheindlin respects all viewpoints and was simply expressing her experience-based perspective. But it was too late. For the first time in her long and storied career, Judge Judy was trending for being on the losing side of an argument. Her brand, built on unassailable authority, had been publicly fractured. The fallout from the CNN town hall extended far beyond the political and media spheres. It permeated the very fabric of American culture, sparking conversations in classrooms, living rooms, and workplaces across the country. Within 48 hours, Jasmine Crockett's campaign was inundated with over $500,000 in small-dollar donations. The contributions poured in from all 50 states, often accompanied by heartfelt messages. "Thank you for standing up to bullies," one donor from Ohio wrote. "That was the most impressive and inspiring thing I've seen a politician do in years," said another from California. This financial windfall was more than just money. It was a powerful grassroots endorsement of her approach, a clear signal that her message of calm, Fact-based courage had resonated deeply with a public weary of performative outrage. The phenomenon was not confined to political enthusiasts. Teachers began showing clips of the exchange in civics and debate classes, using it as a prime example of effective argumentation and the power of maintaining composure. Business schools incorporated the footage into courses on negotiation and conflict resolution, highlighting Crockett's ability to de-escalate a personal attack while simultaneously advancing her own position. Communication coaches and corporate trainers developed entire workshops around her performance, branding it a masterclass in how to deliver devastating counterarguments without losing one's cool. Law schools across the nation made the clip required viewing, with professors dissecting how Crockett's legal training, the meticulous building of a case, the strategic use of evidence, the masterful cross-examination disguised as a simple question, translated so seamlessly into the political arena. Late-night talk shows, the great arbiters of American cultural moments, had a field day. Stephen Colbert joked, "Judge Judy got so owned by Jasmine Crockett that she's going to need a new gavel, one made of ice, because that response was cold." Trevor Noah added, "You know you've lost an argument when your opponent stays calm the entire time and you end up looking like the emotional one. That's not just losing, that's getting schooled." Saturday Night Live dedicated its entire cold open to a pitch-perfect recreation of the exchange, with the actress playing Crockett delivering her lines with an almost serene deadliness, while the actress portraying Judge Judy seemed to physically shrink in her chair with each passing moment. This was no longer just an American story. The BBC ran a segment with the headline, "U.S. Congresswoman's Calm, Dismantling of TV Judge Goes Viral." International audiences, often bewildered by the theatricality of American politics, were fascinated by the calm, fact-based nature of Crockett's victory. What started as a routine cable news segment had become a defining cultural moment, a viral sensation that captured the nation's attention because it spoke to a deeper truth. In an era defined by shouting matches in political theater, Jasmine Crockett demonstrated that the most powerful response is often the quietest one, especially when it is backed by facts, experience, and an unshakable moral clarity. Judge Judy may have built a career on always having the last word, but on that fateful day, Jasmine Crockett proved that the most powerful words are the ones delivered without raising your voice, without losing your composure, and without ever backing down from the truth. And that's a lesson that went viral worldwide for all the right reasons. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible political moments like this one. The world of politics never stops delivering drama, and we'll be here to break it all down for you. What did you think of Jasmine Crockett's response? Let us know in the comments below, and stay tuned for our next video, where we'll dive into the political implications of this viral moment.